Hello, everybody. I hope you're doing fine. This is going to be our first class for pre-intermediate 2. So I'm gonna make it kind of fast for you, okay? So let's start checking the content that I have for you. Okay. So we are going to check past simple passive, and then we're going to move on to some pronunciation. That's everything for this first video for you, okay? So you can check the content on page 109. And then you can check an extra explanation on page 160, okay? So I recommend that you check, this page. Now, so the topic is past simple active, okay? So in this case, we're gonna start with the normal sentences so we can contrast and transform them into past simple passive, okay? First of all, we've got to check the structure of past simple passive, okay? So you've got was plus were plus the verb in past participle. That's going to be your structure for past simple passive. You have to remember how to conjugate the verb be. Now, so for the case of I, he, she, it, what is the correct one? Was or were? So yes, correct. It should be was, okay? So I was, he was, she was, and it was. Now, in the case of we, you, they, which is the correct verb? Were, correct? So we have to use we were, you were, they were. There is no exception, there is no change as in second conditional, so you shouldn't have any problem at all here. Now, once you remember how to conjugate the verb be, you also have to focus on identifying the object, and you need to start with it. No? So now we're gonna contrast past simple active and the topic that we're checking, which is past simple passive. So this first sentence is completely active. You have a dog bit my brother last week. You have to identify the object, okay? So in this case, the object could also be a human. So my brother would be the object, or would be the person that receives the action. Remember the example that I gave you in class about passive? Well, this is an example of it. No? So my brother received that. Now you have to identify the verb, which in this case is bit. No, it comes from bite, bit, beaten. Okay, so you have identified the object, and we also have and the verb. Okay, so as I told you, identify the object and start with it. So we start with my brother. There's nothing else to change. My brother. Okay. Then you have to use the conjugation that I told you. My brother, in this case, was. Why is it was? Because it's a he. So my brother, you can change it for a he, and it's the same thing. So my brother was, and then you have to think about the past participle of bite. So it's bite, bit, bitten. So my brother was bitten, and you have to consider who did it. Who did it? A dog. Is it important? Yes. It could be by a snake, by another person, no? By a cat. So in this case, by a dog, it's important, so we can include it. So my brother was bitten by a duck. When was it? Last week. Some students normally change last week, and sometimes they put it at the beginning. For example, last week, my brother was bitten by a dog. It's all right. You have to include a comma in that case, but it's unnecessary. So if you just write, my brother was bitten by a dog last week, it's correct. I think there's not much purpose in changing that, right? There's no real advantage. So I'm gonna change it to another font. Now, they found lithium in Mexico, okay? The same thing. What is the object? Lithium, okay? So lithium is here. And what is the verb? Found. All right, so I have identified the object. I have identified and the verb. Now, so we start with the object again. Lithium was found, and who found it? It was found by them. By them. Is it necessary? Does it transmit any information? No, it doesn't. In this case, we would have to use the object pronoun. This is the subject pronoun, I, you, we, they, and this is the object pronoun. For example, me, you, him, her, them, okay? But in this case, it's unnecessary because it doesn't provide us of any information, okay? So we erase it. So lithium was found in Mexico, and it's perfect, okay? Now, the government closed schools in Italy, okay? So the same thing, we identify, sorry for that, we identify, and we have here, we have the verb, and here we have the object, okay? Let's change it everything to red, and this underline, this is the object, okay? So now we've got schools, and were closed. So this is your first sentence with where. You have to think schools. If I were to change it and use a different pronoun, which one would it be? It would be they, you know? So they close, okay? So schools were would be the conjugation. So schools were closed, and by the government is important, is necessary. I would add it by the government, where? In Italy. And that's it, okay? You have your sentence in passive voice. Let me change. The final sentence, Japanese people invented sushi. I just created this one. I don't know if they did it, but probably, right? So the same thing, we have sushi, we have invented. And what is your object? Sushi. Okay, so there we go. Sushi was invented by Japanese people. This is important, okay? We don't really know where. Now, maybe in Japan will be too much, no? But by Japanese people, we understand. So these are your sentences in passive voice. I'm going to translate the ones in passive voice so you can start thinking how it works. Mi hermano fue mordido por un perro la semana pasada. En español quedaría como litio fue encontrado en México, sería la traducción directa, ¿no? Generalmente en español diríamos encontraron litio en México, but in English it's more common to use it that way. This one is, las escuelas fueron cerradas por el gobierno en Italia, more or less. El sushi fue inventado por los japoneses, okay? So this would be the correct usage in Spanish. As I told you in class, it's much more common to use passive voice in English. In Spanish, just in some specific cases. What is the purpose? The same as in present. We have to, I mean, my brother, lithium, schools, it becomes more important because it's the first word in your sentence. And it's the natural way in which they can say it. And it sounds good. For example, this one, now they found lithium in Mexico. It's okay, but this one sounds much better. Lithium was found in Mexico. Oh, it sounds much, much better, okay? Now let's move on to an extra explanation, which is pronunciation. You have it right after this explanation on the same page, okay? On page 109 is the next exercise, and I think it's something really important. So it's a pronunciation. We're gonna focus on regular verbs in past and past participle, which is the same, ed, no? For example, work, worked, worked, okay? It's the same conjugation. Everything is all right with simple past. I mean, for Mexican people, this is the one that is difficult for us to pronounce. But there is something quite important, which is this one, only this one. These are very, very important to us because the pronunciation does change, okay? So let's see. You've got an extra syllable. You have to find verbs that end with the sound ta. Visually, it could be the letter T in some cases, but in this case, for example, invite, visually is the letter E, but the pronunciation is ta, no? Invite. So you have to focus on which one they are using, and obviously just regular ones, just the ones that become ed, only those ones, okay? So you've got the first one. The first one has to be ta. So in the case of want, you have to say wanted. Here is the transcription. This is a typical one in British, wanted. You don't have to exaggerate and say wanted, I want it. No, it's not that strong, but it's like I want it, I want it. Or Americans sometimes use the schwa, I want it, I want it. And even the D now in American is I want it, I want it. So it's possible to say I wanted to tell you, and I want it, okay, I want it, it's all right, okay? Now, invite, invited. Now, another case where the same thing happens is with the sound da. So avoid da, that sound. So avoid, avoided, or also American avoided, avoided. And also decide, decided, okay? So the good thing about this topic is quite regular. So in the case of avoid, let's say that you don't forget that it means evitar. So in that case, you know the pronunciation anyways, no? So it's avoid, avoided. Even if you don't know the meaning, the pronunciation is regular, there is no change. So let's check. You've got want, how many syllables? One. So want, wanted. That's why it's important. We have two syllables now, so it's different, right? Want, wanted. Invite, how many syllables? So two. Invite, invite, invited. Three syllables, okay? You've got avoid, how many syllables? Yeah, two. So avoid, avoid, avoided, avoided, okay? And finally, decide. How many syllables? Two again. So decide, decided, okay? So you can clearly see how it changes the pronunciation, and it only applies to those ones. Other examples with da and cha sound, well, need, needed, support, supported, represent, represented, create, created, okay? Now, and let's move on to all of the other verbs which are regular. So the ones that finish or that end with ka, with maybe are, let's see, many endings that are not da or ta, okay? In those cases, we are going to end the pronunciation either with ta or da. To me, I don't pay so much attention to this because, well, let's say, for example, we have consider. The last sound is R, no? Ra. So consider, considered. So probably the last sound is da, I'm not really sure. There are some rules in which you decide considered or considered, but personally, I don't really hear the difference between ta or da, okay? What you have to bear in mind is that this E is not really pronounced. So you're gonna say consider in present, considered in past is the same number of syllables. That's why it's important. If you say considerate or something like that, and it's not the correct way, and it could be confusing for a native speaker or even for somebody with a good level of English. So just repeat after me, try to focus. These are the verbs that we had on the book. So we have in present and then past. Consider, considered, receive, received, prove, proved, help, helped, look, looked, increase, increased, laugh, laughed, appear, appeared, okay? So with this one, this would be the last piece of explanation I will show you. So I hope it's quite useful for you, and definitely check the other videos, please, that I will be making for you. So goodbye, guys. I hope you have a good day.